Hi, friends. All right. There you go, Margaret. Okay, everybody. Hi.
Yes, we did it.
I'm really thrilled about that. I was a little worried there for a second, just based on my own competency with technology. So
This is good. This is good. I like your
progress.
shirt.
Thank you. It says I cry at work.
Oh my God, I freaking love it.
I thought it was appropriate.
I am wearing our Future Stigma Free shirt.
I love that.
So we're both killing it.
Yes, so we got a couple people tuned in right now. So basically everyone, we've been doing like these Quarantine Sucks lives for a couple weeks now on Wednesdays at 7. And last week we had Jacob from Band the Broken, whose tour we were both on got canceled. And this week I'm with Margaret from an amazing organization called Bring Change to Mind. And Margaret, I'll let you kind of take over there and talk about that.
Yeah, so hi guys, my name's Margaret. I am the Southern California Regional Program Manager for Bring Change to Mind, and we are a national nonprofit that was founded in 2010 by actor and activist Glenn Close, and she co-founded it with her sister Jessie and her nephew Kaylin, and our mission is to decrease the stigma surrounding mental illness. So when we first started, the primary goal was just to get the conversation started, and they did that by creating PSAs, which we are still doing. And actually, our newest PSA just came out this week, and the theme it's so good, but it's also very ironic because of the timing. The theme is no normal.
And that's perfect.
Right? We came up with this before the virus broke out. So it wasn't supposed to be released until May 1st, but we were like, oh, we got to speed this up. Like, this is perfect for right now. So you can check that out on YouTube, Facebook, and whatnot. But yeah, we started our high school program in 2015, and our high school program are clubs in high schools, and the teenagers work on decreasing stigma surrounding mental illness on their school campus, which is amazing. It's evidence-based, it's peer-to-peer led, events and activities driven, and these students are, just phenomenal. They're becoming our future advocates. And our program has expanded insanely. So we're in 250 high schools across the nation with 7,500 kids, 7 regions. We're in 18 states. So yeah, we've grown a lot, and it's really cool.
Yeah, you're doing something all right. That's crazy. And so when my publicist, Dana, who's amazing, she's a good friend of mine, introduced me to Bring Change to Mind, I was really moved by the mission of not only, like you've been saying, destigmatizing mental illness and promoting mental wellness, but also just the overall idea of reaching out to specifically young people, because I remember being a young person still, but especially when I was in high school, there just isn't a huge support network, and not intentionally, obviously, within schools sometimes and things like that. I remember I went to an amazing high school, incredibly fantastic environment, and because I had a meltdown in class one day, guys had set up this mandatory meeting with a counselor who literally told me, I was told her about this meltdown I had, my depression and being suicidal, all this, right? And she said, well, take some time for you. You like Pinterest, right? Just take some time. Pinterest is a great way to vent, and literally told me Pinterest was going to heal my depression. And I was like, I go to an amazing school, and this was the kind of help that I receive. I can't imagine people who are, a little more disadvantaged in other schools that maybe don't have the funding, things like that. To have the student-led program is just incredible to me. So kind of what I wanted to talk about is, in light of COVID-19 and everything happening right now, how do you guys expect this to impact people's mental health and wellness, or lack thereof? Because obviously there's a lot going on right now, a lot of unusual right now. Like you said, there is no normal right now, especially. So how do you expect people's mental health to be impacted?
Totally, yeah. I think the biggest things that, you know, most of us are hearing about, and definitely we're hearing about with our students, is the first things that the students will talk about is like anxiety, depression. But I think in general with the public, it's like I'm hearing a lot of people talking about loneliness, anxiety and depression, and even for people who struggle with other mental illnesses like PTSD is getting triggered a lot. But then also, I think collectively as a whole, there's a lot of articles that are coming out about this now, where what we're experiencing is cultural grief. And I couldn't agree with that more. And I don't think people would understand that unless they like read one of these articles or heard somebody talking about it, because no matter what situation you're in with this lockdown, like we are all experiencing loss in some kind of way, whether it's, you know, a vacation you had planned, or just not being able to go to work. For all of these students who are seniors, like not having their graduation or any of their senior activities, there's a lot of loss going on right now, which is turning into, you know, grief, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the things that I think are coming up the most for people.
Yeah, and I think everything you said like is kind of exactly the direction I figured you were going to go in, because I was just thinking in personal experience, just with people I know, or like getting to do these lives and really interact with a lot of listeners. And I suppose viewers in this context who are sharing what they're going through with, say, job loss, things like that. Or totally. Like you said, school being canceled. A lot of people, unfortunately, have non-ideal home situations where school or work is their escape. And that is the situation that sustains them.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of people who right now, like I'm very fortunate in the respect that my psychiatrist has been offering over the phone options for appointments, things like that. But I know that she was talking to me, and she said that because all of the length and involvement that a new client requires, she had to cancel a lot of first-time appointments and things like that I never even would have thought of. And so, like, there's so many people being affected. It breaks my heart that she had to cancel those appointments, because I think people who are trying to take steps in the right direction, get the help they need, things like that, and this just completely threw a wrench in that. So all that being said, I'm totally with you on everything you said. And I don't have, obviously it's so funny that I'm like, I'm with you, in reality it's facts, so it doesn't matter if I agree or not. And I know, just as someone with really fun raging mental illnesses, I'm sure so many of us can relate. Like, I'm bipolar 1. I take, as I always show during these lives, a whole lot of medication to function. And there are people experiencing like shortages of medication because everyone's stocking up right now, things like that. And so, like, just the weirdest stuff that I never would have thought of in a situation like this.
Totally.
So all that being said, we kind of agree that with the fact that mental health is going to take a hit for everyone, already is taking a hit for everyone. Since that's going to be a global thing, it already is.
Oh yeah, completely.
How do you think that that's going to impact society's perspective or view on mental health and wellness and illness? Do you think that the more widespread experience of mental health issues is going to help destigmatize, or do you think it's going to push anything further under the rug? What do you personally think is going to happen there?
I tend to, just in like regular life, have a pretty positive outlook on things, and I see this as it can lean positive, I think. Like I said earlier, Bring Change to Mind were founded upon the principle of getting the conversation started, and I feel like that's what this situation is doing. I mean, just think about like in daily life, like especially when this first started, when people were asking all the time, like, oh, how are you? And it was just like, oh, how are you? Like, for real. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, like things are good, like move on. It was just like, oh shoot, like I'm really hard time. I'm having a lot of anxiety, like blah, 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 blah. Like, I feel like most people were having real conversations, and it's just like much more socially acceptable to like actually say how you're feeling. because we are going through this collective experience all together. And so because we're starting that conversation, I'm hoping that it will like continue, you know, once we are out of this, whatever that means. Because, you know, we pave the way for each other. Like, I'm sure you've experienced this, like with celebrities starting to talk about like depression or anxiety, it like opened up other people being like, oh yeah, me too. Especially with like bipolar disorder. I feel like within the last few years, a lot more celebrities have been talking about that. And because like, you know, Demi Lovato being like, yeah, I went to treatment and I got diagnosed with bipolar 1 or 2, you know, bipolar.
Selena Gomez just came out as bipolar also. And I was like it's really crazy.
And so it's like, the more people open up and talk about what's happening with them, it paves the way for other people to do so as well. So I feel like this is one of the silver linings for the future. I think it can really open up like the decreasing of stigma for sure.
Yeah, I really love that you brought up what you brought up when it comes to people being honest now about the how are you thing.
Yeah.
Because there's always this constant cultural joke of, you know, what I'm fine really means, right? And it's never that you're fine 99.9% of the time. And in reflection, as you're talking, I'm like, God, for the last like month, every single time I've checked in with a work associate, to a close friend, to someone who's checking me out at the pharmacy, like literally anyone, it's been a real honest interaction, authentic human interaction. And so I hadn't even considered what an amazing, like how indicative that might be of really positive future going forward. So that's really encouraging. You're 100% right.
Yeah, because also it's like behavior changing too. Like now that people are having this opportunity to potentially for the first time say how they're actually feeling, like maybe it's like a reparative experience in a way. And so in the future, like they'll be more likely to say how they really feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea that this could be making, you know, some sort of healthy cultural habit. Again, if you're just tuning in, I'm with a friend, Margaret, from Bring Change to Mind, amazing mental health centered nonprofit organization. And right now we're talking about mental health in context of COVID-19, everything going on right now, self-isolation, social distancing, etc. Everyone knows what's going on. I don't really need to explain that for sure. And one big thing that I really enjoyed and has been interesting to watch in terms of like socially and in terms of mental health is there's this kind of debate going on, right, where some people are saying like, you know, if you don't take this time for self-betterment, then you're wasting it. And there's a huge camp that's like, absolutely not. Like there's not a sudden pressure to start your next side hustle and learn how to play guitar and like everything else you could ever possibly imagine. Like, and I thought that was really interesting because with the kind of fire back that no, you don't have to spend this time trying to constantly better yourself. Like, is that a really productive step if you want it to be? Absolutely. But also, I think that there is this, especially in American culture, I won't speak on culture I'm not a part of, there's this certain any free time has to become work time.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Understanding. And I think that a lot of people have carried that into this experience and that's kind of gotten shot down. And the response has kind of been, actually, no, this habit we have of trying to capitalize on all free time isn't healthy. Yeah. And sometimes you do need time to grieve loss and to be uncomfortable and not force yourself to work through it in the conventional I'm working way, you know? So I thought that was really cool.
Well, super quick on that note, for like when you said side hustle, I remember I read this one time where it was just like one of those things on social media where it was just like, your hobby doesn't need to be a side hustle. And I stopped and I read that. I was like, oh, this is so true, because like, I mean, I almost feel that way. And like, no, people almost like don't have hobbies anymore because like hobbies do turn into side hustles. And it's like when did our society and culture create this weird dichotomy where just, I don't know, we lost being able to have interests or just have a hobby for fun. But one of the poets that I really, really love. Her name is Yersa Daly Ward. She is just an amazing poet, has so much cool stuff on her Instagram. And she did an Instagram live like earlier on during the quarantine, and I was able to tune into it. And she had just written this poem that was on this topic, like basically sitting at home and just being, and what that means though, like how much actually happens when you just allow yourself to sit and just be, that like alchemy happens and magic does happen, and you're not just sitting, like things are happening, like you are still growing, you are blooming. And if you're busy all the time, you're missing out on that. And I was
Yeah.
like, yes.
Absolutely. And that's something that like I'm so glad we got into this. Like I noticed within myself, and I like also is that I love that quote because like for me, my thing has always been music, and now music's my job. I still love music. It's taken on a very different meaning because of that. Because of it being my profession now. I love graphic design, and I started monetizing that, and now I'm like borderline burnt out on this thing that I've loved for years.
Yeah.
And like almost everything I've ever liked is that story. And I realized recently, like really with the start of quarantine and all that, like God, I don't have anywhere to go. I can't go to a coffee shop and work for 6 hours straight. I can't do the things I normally do.
Totally.
What are my hobbies? I realized I had none that didn't become a job. And so I think that that's been a really cool development right now, is people like in the free time where you feel like you have the availability to really, curate and harvest who you are. I've really found, like, just from communicating with others and my own experience, that that's one of the main ways, if any, that this time can be spun for, the better, spun into a positive. And with all that being said, since you mentioned social media, I just want your take on the positive and negatives of all this happening during our 24-hour news cycle age, during our social media age. Do you think it is helping people kind of spread hope and positivity? Do you think it's making it people more liable to discover misinformation and develop fear? Maybe a little bit of both. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's a bit of both, but I also like strongly believe you have the control over the information you're taking in. I know a lot of people that social media gives them a lot of anxiety, and we all do things different ways, but for me it's always been very simple. I'm like, just change your feed, like unfollow who makes you feel bad. That is like thankfully something I've never had a hard time with. I know other people do, so like I have no judgment about that. But to me it's like very black and white. I'm like, just unfollow it. But then also like curate your feed to what you want to see. Like I follow so many just like positivity accounts. Upworthy is like literally my favorite Instagram account, and I follow so many different accounts that are like Upworthy. Even just like Humans of New York, like accounts that make me happy and make me cry because of the good in the world. And I think at the beginning of the quarantine, I was feeling okay like the first 2 weeks. Of course there was anxiety, but I was feeling okay because of all of the beautiful stuff I was actually seeing on social media, like all of the Italians out on their balconies singing. My favorite video that came out of Italians being on their decks, there was like these 2 different buildings where they all sat down and had dinner at the same time on their balcony.
Oh my God. That is the sweetest thing I've ever heard.
So I was just like, gosh, there's like, this is showing all of the good in the world. But then, I mean, like sometimes this is a perfect example of misinformation, even with good stuff. There was a lot of, I guess not memes, I don't know, news stories and stuff going around about the dolphins were returning to the Venice canals.
Yes.
And there was also another one about these elephants who stormed some like rice paddy thing in Thailand, or it was a vineyard, and they got drunk and like fell asleep.
Yes.
And I actually shared both of these things because I thought they were adorable. And then I found out that these were fake news stories. And I was like,
isn't that
why would
insane
somebody
what a
think
slippery
that?
slope it is? Like how you, because here's the thing, like I feel like older generations especially fall victim to this just because the nature of news has changed so much and what is news and what isn't that news. But like even coming from a generation where it's really been like just drilled into my head, or our head, because we're the same age, is like that, you know, you have to research your news, research your news, research your news.
Totally.
I would
Yeah.
never think that I had to research elephants getting drunk. Like I would never think that that was something people would lie about. It's like, what's the point?
Right?
You know what I mean? And so that's what people are doing with just stupid stuff, like
I
elephants getting
know.
drunk. I'm like, oh God, like what are they doing with the pandemic? So like that does cause me a little anxiety, but I hadn't even like thought about like how deeply really I do appreciate and have appreciated things like, you know, the Italians singing together, or like just little silly things like that are just so sweet, so heartwarming. And you know, there's always this argument philosophically of whether or not humans are inherently good or evil. And you know, I can't say because I'm not a genius, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have all the secrets to the universe in my palm, but it's times like these that you kind of lean towards the former, where you're like, okay, maybe when push comes to shove, like community is what we cling to as social creatures. Maybe kindness is what we cling to. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. So
but I will have to say, like, on the negative end, because there is negative stuff, definitely like curate your feed to be good. But even like with me doing that, I did have to stop listening to the press conferences because they were killing me. And then like I've had a few days where I've taken Instagram off my phone, but that's mainly because since we are stuck at home, I'm finding myself on it so much more. And I'm like, it is that weird, because I'm very interested in like the brain chemistry of how social media affects our brains. And I do notice that like there are times when I almost feel like I don't have a choice in like continuing to go on my phone. And that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And when it does, I'm like, okay, I just got to take this off my phone for like 24 hours and just like be able.
And that's a healthy self-awareness, though. I think more people, including myself, could afford to adopt that. You know what I mean? Like it's being like having the strength and the like I'm gonna use the word self-awareness again, to be like, ooh, I'm falling into the slippery slope, down the slippery slope of maybe this is becoming a habit rather than like a passive enjoyment. I think that like being able to say I need to go on a diet for 24 hours, you know what I mean? Like things like that is something that like I think a lot of us could benefit from, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like a reset, you know? Yeah. Like, because I mean, it's going to differ from person to person. Sometimes people need a longer reset from social media, but for me, it's typically like, I can do like 24 hours, maybe 2 days, and like, I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know, it's like you said, like, you do have, I feel like there's this sense of when there's so much information out there, a lack of control and a lack of autonomy. And I think it's just nice to continue to point out what you're saying, continue to remember what you're saying of, you know, the power is in your hands. Literally, your cell phone is in your hands and you choose what you see, what you don't. So, like, I realize, like, even, like, fun, silly things with me, and I continue silly because but I probably shouldn't, because trivializing social media when it's such a huge part of our lives probably isn't very smart of me. But it's like I'll hop on something like Facebook because I'm like, oh my God, I've been working for 6 hours straight. Like, can I have, like, I'll take a 5-minute breather, 15-minute breather.
Totally.
And I'll like see just so many people arguing and just negative energy, and it kills me. So then I'm like, maybe I'm just going to go look at pictures of dresses on Pinterest. Like, things like that. Just totally. How to redirect energy. And so, you know, I think that, there's a lot of opportunities for us to kind of channel positivity, but for those of us who are having a harder time, since you're obviously really knowledgeable on the resources that are available, especially at a time like this where you can't necessarily go to your therapist and see them in person, things like that. You can't, if your piece is spending time in public places because you're a social creature, you can't, or socializing just in general between friends isn't really available to you. What are some low cost or free resources that comply with social distancing right now that people could take advantage of if they're feeling like their mental health is taking a hit right now?
Yeah, crisis text line is like my number one. They are so phenomenal. So let's see, I think you can text home to 741-741, and a crisis counselor will text you back within 5 minutes is the longest, but honestly, it's usually like a minute. It's really fast. And they're trained, they're amazing, and they also it's anonymous, like they're not going to take what you're saying, but kind of like on a nerdy end, they do gather data, and the data that they gather is phenomenal. So I get emails every week, and it tells you like what is spiking throughout America, like in certain age groups. It's very interesting. But yeah, I have friends who work for Crisis Text Line or volunteer, and even as a volunteer experience, it's really amazing. And then I have always heard really amazing things from actual texters. And then the other resource I would say that's a little bit more tailored to wherever people live, an amazing organization called To Write Love on Her Arms.
I worked with them.
Oh, I love them so much. I
Yes.
remember back in the day, like when I was a teenager going to Warped Tour, I would like go over to their stand and be like, hey, I'm gonna buy a shirt.
I love that. Great people.
Yeah. So they have an amazing help tool on their website, and you can put in your zip code and then find like all sorts of help. I don't know how they put this together because it is so extensive, but it goes beyond just like finding a therapist. It's like food banks or housing. It is so extensive, and it is tailored for your zip code. And then I would say like whatever you're needing, look for that on that website, and then call that resource, because they are going to be able to help you a lot more for like your local area, because they'll be in the know of like what's happening, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I wasn't aware like of the extent of, even having worked with Right Love in Her Arms, the extent of that resource and those resources. So I think that's amazing. Yeah. And I've never actually shared this with anyone. I'm like borderline uncomfortable sharing it, but I feel like it's important given that it was brought up. I was very, very deeply suicidal for 12 years of my life, and I'm 20. So for perspective, not a great ratio of suicidal, non-suicidal years. And I actually utilized the crisis text hotline when
great.
I was like very, very close to the edge at one point. And it was like an experience that was a really positive experience for me. So as someone who's coming from being on the receiving end of that help, like I was definitely hesitant going into it because I'm not a sharer, or at least I am now, but at that point in my life, honestly, I wasn't very comfortable at all with sharing with the place I was at in my life. So the idea of sharing it with a complete stranger was completely bizarre to me. But the fact that it was anonymous was really reassuring. And then realizing that it's a completely free resource by people who care, and like it wouldn't be doing this if they didn't have an interest in helping me and whoever else needs help. And so that was really what encouraged me and pushed me to take advantage of it, because I felt really hopeless and I didn't know where else to turn. And that was a really good experience. So for anyone who's listening / watching, I suppose right now, like that, like just from I personally have experienced both of those resources that Margaret's just mentioned, and totally the cosign is there, like amazing resources. So yeah, I feel like we hit a lot of really good notes. Is there anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think this is a hard time, but I just can't stress enough like finding the silver linings in all of it
Mhm.
though, because there are a lot of them.
Yes.
And they're really I've always been really big on like paying attention to little things, and I think people are starting to do that now because we're being
Yeah.
forced to, it's like being forced to just go on a walk in our neighborhood. And I mean, even for me, that's been amazing. And like looking at the plants that are around and like getting to know who lives or where you live just by like
Yeah.
walking past people constantly. So yeah, just looking for the silver linings.
I love that. So again, I'm with Margaret from Bring Change to Mind. Go check out their website, their socials if you haven't already. Thank you so much. This has been a
Yeah,
really
thank
great
you.
live. And have a great night. I love
You
all
too.
of you who are watching. Yeah, I'll talk to you later, okay?
Bye.
Bye.